Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Down in the Country podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Reed, and today we are joined by James Robert Webb, who is an up and coming country music artist. Thank you so much for your time today, James.
Absolutely, Dylan. Thanks for having me on.
Reading your background is just fascinating. So you've been able to balance both your blue collar roots and your role as a musculoskeletal radiologist.
Yeah.
How have they shaped you in your identity in the genre of country music?
Well, first, kudos on doing your research because most people would totally flub musculoskeletal radiologist like the first thousand times I said it. But uh, yeah, I mean, I came from this poor kid that grew up on a little farm outside, and went to a rural school, public school, and I guess I was kind of a black sheep because I was the first in my family to go to college on either side, other than my mother, and then I ended up being a physician. So there was always that drive there because I was lucky to be academically gifted and did well in school. And but music was always what kept me sane. Um, and I think what keeps me those blue collar roots are kind of what keep me grounded and balanced. And they definitely make me a better songwriter, I think, but they definitely also make me a better physician because I come from a background where you know everything's layperson speak. I had to kind of explain it in terms everybody can understand. So that kind of rolls over to songwriting too. But the balance, I mean, it depends on the day if I think I'm balancing it right because I'm like everybody else. If you get distracted, there's a squirrel outside or whatever. You've always got to come back to focus on what you're working on. So
Hmm. And you've released a lot of new music recently. Ride or Die, which actually was just released earlier this month.
that's
Can
right.
you provide just a short little introduction about what the song's about and what it means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of angles that I love about Ride or Die that I wanted to write a song like this, and I had a few ideas, like the bridge, like Ride or Die, because at the time when we wrote it, there weren't really any Ride or Die songs out there. I think there's more out there in different genres now. But on one side, I was like, well, that's a good sync placement because Ride or Die is kind of very zeitgeist. But to me, it goes in that loyalty and the double entendre of one thing. It could mean like a gang, like you're in this thing forever, like the lyric, and also like your bestie or your number one or your romantic partner or whatever. So those two things kind of tied together, and I had a few lyrical ideas. I brought it with to write with a couple of my friends, Daniel Kleinditz and Alex Dooley, and it just kind of flowed from there. So I wanted to write something that was almost like a vocal band song, and that
Uh-huh.
gets thrown around a lot. And I think of like maybe the Allman Brothers or even the Doobie Brothers, or obviously the Eagles. I always forget to mention the Eagles because they're like the elephant in the room.
Uh-huh.
That in Alabama, if you're thinking country, I mean, there's a lot of great vocal groups like Shenandoah and Restless Heart. Um, but again, I'm a solo act, but I still didn't want to shy away from doing that kind of full kind of harmony sound because it is kind of a big anthem to me.
Uh-huh. Do you mind if we play a clip for the audience?
Yeah, I definitely love to play a clip because I've been talking in country terms, but for me, this is kind of more of a roots rock, or I don't know, somewhere like the Revivalist, or you know, people also say like Southern rock. So when I say Southern rock, my number one influence there is probably like the Black Crows. So this is kind of maybe like the Black Crows if there was multiple people
Yeah.
singing.
Yeah. Just as a heads up, everyone, great lyric video too as well. I don't want to spoil what it is. You got to go watch it, but
It's
I
coming
really loved it.
up. Thanks, man. I'm glad you liked it.
All right, here it is. On my shoulder, all wrapped up in that body heat. Yeah, the sun is shining, we grew up riding, just can't get any better. Ride or die, and sing forever. Ride or die. I really love that kind of that hard guitar rock riff that you add into it.
Yeah, thank you.
And then it goes into that kind of orchestra of like drums, and then you have the vocals kind of coming on top of it. I like how kind of that composition of the song, because
Thanks.
you know, it doesn't seem like one really overpowers the other. Is that kind of what you were trying to go for in that?
Yeah, kind of a balanced sound. You know, this is probably the first album I've just produced solo, and definitely I started this album kind of trying to definitely get out of the country realm, because what are genres today anyway, and what is country?
Mhm.
You know, because I've done a lot of super traditional country stuff over the last decade, just because of out of kind of respect of the art form. Because I'm a rocker and I like kind of all kinds of music. So for this one, I tried to get away from that. The label of trying to put it into one genre or whatever, and definitely a lot edgier on the guitar stuff. So
Mhm.
I mean, maybe we're venturing into dad rock, but I mean, hell, I mean, Queen and AC/DC and all that stuff is dad rock too. So if that's dad rock, then I would love to be in that category with bands like that.
Are you going to trademark that term now?
Dad rock, yeah, maybe that should be my dad rock doc should be my Instagram handle or something, I guess.
James Robert Webb, genre dad rock.
As soon as Spotify starts putting that, or Billboard does a chart.
Yeah. And then you have another song, Gentlemen Start Your Weekends. And could you just provide us a little bit of an introduction of what that song is about?
Yeah, I mean, that song is a little bit more, maybe even more straightforward as far as the song form and lyric form of maybe like an updated Brooks and Dunn kind of song. So
Okay.
it's just, Gentlemen Start Your Weekends is like, it's Friday night. And you can think of it like getting off Friday night and going out of work and going, to dance or pick up, take your wife or your girlfriend, or go out to try to find a romantic partner, or just going out to have a good time with the guys. Any of that. I think in my head, there's two things that are goofy as hell. And I think I have this vision of like Fred Flintstone rolling down the Brontosaurus's neck,
Mm-hmm.
and work day when the whistle's blowing. And the other thing is just goes back to like being in high school when, not just, blue collar workers, but like when you're in school and just like, it's finally Friday night and the bell rings and you go out with you're going out to the parking lot and getting the heck out of whatever high school you're in, with your friends, if you're lucky enough to drive, or hitching a ride with somebody else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that feeling of freedom on the weekend is kind of what this upcoming album is really about. And for me, I wanted to kind of pull in more of my riff rock, kind of influences. So there's a little bit of Rolling Stones and maybe even like the Donnas. People are familiar with that. And so it's really kind of more of an updated, harder rock version of maybe like 90s country.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind if we play a clip of Gentlemen Start Your Weekends for the
Do I mind? I mean, like, yeah, I'm glad that, no, I'm honored to have you play it.
Awesome. Here it is. No, I really,
Yeah.
the question that I really had about that song when I first listened to it is that guitar part, is it two parts or is it just one entire part?
Yeah, there's a couple of I kind of like come from I'm a huge Guns N' Roses fan. So like the title track on this Weekend Outlaw song is maybe like a Guns N' Roses meets Red Hot Chili Peppers kind of thing. So it's definitely a dual guitar thing. Because what I loved about what is that? It's one of the biggest selling albums of all time, the Appetite for Destruction one with like Welcome to the Jungle and everything. I listened to that for a while, and then I listened to it with headphones, and I realized, wait, there's two different. They're like really close, but it's like two completely different things that that Slash and Izzy are playing, and that just always kind of blows my mind. So there's some layer in there in production, and the other thing is I think for most people it just kind of catches their ear because I write a lot of modally, like I love artists like Tom Petty did this a lot, Steely Dan, a lot of jazz people do this a lot, or jazz influenced people, that you play chords and they sound like they go together, but they're in different keys. So like that whole thing in that chord progression is like a very modal thing because they don't all they're technically key changes, but it doesn't sound like a key change. So yeah, so to do that, we have kind of like that Keith Richards kind of almost like Brown Sugar or something. And then there's that a little bit Kenny Greenberg's playing the lead on that little some of those little lead lick things. So yeah, we had a lot of fun recording that. So we did it live.
Yeah, and it's you know, and it's what I did like about both of those songs is that you kind of really you know, you kind of really showcased your personality in both of them, which I really appreciated when I was listening to them.
Thanks. I would be remiss too, like the one person that's a massive influence on that song in my style in general, I think, especially go back to, you know, blue collar and kind of rock and stuff, is Hank Williams Jr., who I think gets not nearly enough credit at all, you know, as he's a massive songwriter in the shadow of his father, obviously. But, you know, to me, that song is kind of like his, you know, all my rowdy friends are coming over tonight. It kind of has that kind of vibe, you know, it's a guy's thing too. It's not, you know, it's not gender exclusive, you know, it's not trying to keep the females out or anything, but it's just, you know, at a time now when it's not socially acceptable for guys to, you know, like be guys. I am kind of being a champion of that kind of stuff, you know, not being toxic, but come on, have a good time. Girls, guys, night.
Yeah, and I also I don't know if this was kind of a thing that you were trying to make with both of those songs, but it seems like they could also be both workout songs too as well.
Definitely. You know, I like up-tempo stuff. I mean, the song that we had that just went #1 at Texas is definitely a ballad. It's kind of like maybe Garth Brooks, George Strait kind of unusual ballad rodeo song. But for the most part, like if I love something, it's usually got a beat and it's up-tempo. That probably comes from listening to Prince and Michael Jackson as a kid, you know. And yeah, so thank you. I mean, I'm glad to hear that. I think we're getting played in Planet Fitness on that one and Ride or Die, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. You know? No, that's awesome. And, you know, it leads into my next question very nicely. So you have a handful of accolades to add to your name. So I'm going to list them out. 2022 Country Breakout Awards Independent Artist of the Year by Nashville's Music Row Magazine. 2023 New Faces nominee at the Texas Regional Radio Report Music Awards. Lovesick Drifting Cowboy, #1, and Gentlemen Start Your Weekends, #2. Something Out of Nothing, #3 at Texas Regional Radio Report Music Awards, and then Something Out of Nothing, which before we hopped on this podcast, you were saying that it went very recently #1 on Texas Regional Radio too as well. And out of all of these accomplishments, kind of what do they mean to you, and how have you remained humble as an artist given all of the success that you're having?
Hey, when I will maybe not be quite as humble if I'm up there with Adele or somebody having like 12 Grammys or something, or you know, like these amazing other artists. You know, there's so many great artists. I'm just lucky to be in the fellowship of people that make music to me. You know, like in the priesthood of, you know, that kind of divine connection, and be one of the people who get to bring music to other people, like to be a channeler of that. So I am a super perfectionist with an inferiority complex, so it's really hard for me to be humble or not be humble, you know. I always feel like I've got something to learn. I think that even there's something that my 16-year-old son loves to talk about, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like the people that are just learning stuff are the most confident in what they know, you know. It's kind of like my mama said, kind of, you know, appeal to authority. And then the more you learn something, the more you start to realize the nuances. And when it comes to, you know, a lot of things like philosophy, like most philosophers, like Plato and Socrates, like the whole considered like the greatest philosophers of all time in Western civilization, at least. And most of their arguments were like at a very basic level. We can't even understand the world around us. Like our assumptions are all flawed, and even the most wise person realizes that they're not wise at all. So I mean, that's a long way chasing a bunch of rabbits around trees to say that's the humility is just kind of ingrained, and that's probably the problem. That's probably the thing that I struggle the most with as an artist is, being an artist requires a lot of ego to some extent. So, I do have to put a character on to entertain people and pump people up. That's not always, necessarily how I am like right now. So like on interviews like this, I try to just be the down to earth, regular person that I am, and no holds barred, because that really serves me on the medical side. On the medical side, I have all these accolades in music, which are wonderful. But on the medicine, that's where I would say I've been doing that for 20 years, and I really am, one of the leading experts in the world on the thing that I specialize in, because I'm so highly specialized in it. And the more I learn about that, and other colleagues of mine around the country and the world about this, the more we realize we don't know. So it's just like science is about asking better questions. It doesn't give us absolute answers. So I think, the way I was raised from that down home kind of, you always be nice to everybody. And also what I've seen in my career, even, at the heights of academic achievement, is that, there's always somebody out there smarter than you, somebody more talented. There's a lot of musicians that are less talented than others have made it just because they hustle and they're more dedicated to their craft. So
yeah, because it's kind of funny. So being from Dallas, so basically I'm from right across the street from basically where you're from in Oklahoma. So right. So it's we were always taught the phrases like "bless your heart" or another one that I really love. I don't say it much, but it's like the porch light is on, but no one's home.
Yeah.
So
the one French fry short of a Happy Meal. Yeah, I love those little phrases regionally in Tulsa, in Texas, and like the Mid South and stuff. One of the songs on this album coming up, and it's actually I think the next one we're releasing on digital, is called "Time's a Wastin'," which is like you've heard that all the time. Time's a wastin', get a move on, that kind of stuff. So those folksy little sayings are cool.
And to kind of what you were mentioning about Oklahoma, it leads into my next question nicely. I'm very curious about, specifically, you can talk about music all day long, but if you don't understand the human behind it, then you can't really understand the music. So I'm very curious about, how, being raised on a small farm outside of Tulsa, how is that represented in your music and who James is?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of touched on the parts of the humble roots, because like the more you get into the big city people or people that know more than you, the more you realize your limits of knowledge, like even just going to college or, going to Allstate or something like that. So that's always kind of kept me grounded. I think it's some of those simple, I hate to use the phrase family values, but just kind of, traditional small town, nuclear family kind of values of the importance of hard work and, ethics and, family and network being important, and integrity, keeping your word, and, just Western virtues in general, like honesty, integrity, and, truthfulness and altruism, over greed and things like that. Those have all kind of guided me, I think. And it's not so much that I thought about that, but it's just like by example, like the people, in your lives that you're growing up. In whatever culture you come up, if you have connections in your family of origin and your communities of origin, that, I've always been one that tried to identify things that in other people that I admire as an empath, because that's another blessing and a curse,
Mhm.
and try to cultivate those qualities in me. So like even I was taught by another physician when I was in residency that like you're going to come across people that you can't stand or that you don't get along with, your personalities clash or whatever, for whatever reason. But there's usually something that you can learn from them, right? So that's always been, since that time, I've kind of always turned my focus to kind of shining a light on like what's the good thing, what did the universe or the cosmos bring them into my orbit for me to learn.
Mhm.
I may only be working with them for a month, and it might be that they're teaching me something about me that needs to change, or maybe it's a characteristic that they have, like like they always call people yes sir and yes ma'am.
Mhm.
Uh, so I think those things kind of kept me grounded. My experiences in medicine, just in medicine too, it's just like most of my colleagues that I went to medical school with are ready to retire, and that like they are done with like all the red tape and
Mhm.
the healthcare system right now. Just unfortunately, is in the last 5 years even just gotten worse and worse as far as quality of life for
Mhm.
healthcare providers. Not even just, I'm not even mentioning the pandemic. I mean outside of that, all the regulatory stuff. But I'm really lucky that I'm in a I work as a physician in a niche where I actually get to help people. Like, and most of my colleagues get to help people, but like I see probably a patient at least once a month that is in a wheelchair that I'm able to get them out of a wheelchair, and I'm not a surgeon. It's just um, so it's really gratifying to be able to do that, and it's humbling
Mhm.
because this kid from Kellyville couldn't have done that if I hadn't had the opportunity to go to medical school and learn from great people along the way. So it's really a privilege on that side just to be able to help people. And so then to have this calling in music is also a blessing and a curse, right? You know about songwriting. It's kind of like one of those things it could be something fun, but then if you want to get good at it, you have to be obsessive about it. It's like I could sit around and write songs for fun that my friends and my family and people would like or think are funny. But if I want to like achieve at that level with other professional songwriters, then it's like you have to do that on a professional level. So it's like I'm not playing golf at the local course. I'm like trying to be on the PGA tour, as
Mhm.
as my hobby. So
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I'm always up against somebody, not up against, but I mean always encountering other people at high levels of success that are just amazing. And some people are amazing because they've worked at it and crafted. And some people just have amazing God-given abilities that they were kind of born with, certain things that I'll never be able to do in songwriting. And I probably have some of those gifts that they don't have, that I
Mhm.
haven't discovered those yet.
Yeah. Well, and as someone who um, is currently dabbling in writing, I wouldn't consider myself a songwriter because I don't think I have a right to call myself that. But it's just thinking of like how you want to structure it, what words you want to use, what like how do you envision it goes? Like, do you start off with a guitar or a piano or is it straight vocals? Like, it's a whole process that you
Yeah.
know it's hard.
Yeah, it is difficult for the budding songwriter. I mean, look, when I was in high school, I always had a creative bug. And
Hmm.
I draw, I doodle quite a bit. Like a lot of people think my doodles are pretty awesome. I haven't sold any, like me posting them on social media. But I'm always looking for creative outlets, and I've tried different kinds of writing over the years. When I was in high school, I would try to get my angst and anger and frustration out by writing lyrics, and I would emulate say like James Hetfield of Metallica, like try to write songs like Metallica songs, and then I would write them, and then I'd look at him at the lyrics. I'm like, well, these aren't as good as a Metallica song, so I must not be a writer. So I think there's that perception that it's hard if you don't have guidance or you don't have people around you to kind of guide you with that. But if you're trying to, when you're first starting to get into the any kind of creative thing, whether it's painting or whatever, if you have unrealistic expectations you're setting for yourself, like like for me, it would be like the extreme example would be like, well, I'm going to go try to paint a watercolor, and I feel like I should look like my first painting should look like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel or something, right? And if I can't do that, it's not worth the effort. Which is not where is it at? I mean, first off, you're not going to be like Michael, somebody as great as Michelangelo is not even going to be like Michelangelo, because everybody's artistic expression is going to be different and unique, which is the amazing thing about this world. Billions and billions of human beings in existence on this planet alone. So if you feel the calling to a creative thing, it's either one of those things where you can try it a little bit, and if you feel like you can set it down, then set it down. If you can do anything else, don't pick something else, right? But if you feel like the calling, and you keep, the more you do it, like you just you enjoy it and it's fulfilling, and then you're a songwriter. I mean, go after it, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to get a cut by you don't have to get a number one hit on Billboard with some hot AC artists. I mean, you can write great music. You can you don't even have to write it commercially. You can write things that are fulfilling to you. It can be like therapy and ways to get out your feelings. And so that's kind of how that is some days for me. But my ultimate goal as a writer is to write songs that inspired me, like write songs that had the same effect on other people that other great songs have had on me. You know what I mean? So like, I go back to the summer when I was 13 and lost my grandfather. It happened to be, I was swimming in my great uncle's swimming pool all summer, kind of mourning his passing, listening mostly to The Joshua Tree by U2. It just came out. So like, that there was something in the magic in that album, for me, that helped me get through a difficult time. And I think of times that, like when I was in, college, albums that came out, or songs that came out that, were part of my, growing up and formative years, and having time, the first song you dance to, somebody you love, or whatever, the first time you drive a car, all those kind of really cool experiential things that the sonically are become part of our total experience of those memories. So that's just amazing to me that happens. And I don't know that everybody has that experience with music. I think a lot of us feel it a lot more deeply, especially people that are called to be creatives. But I think everybody feels it, certainly my ear perks up when I hear something bizarre and new and different, like I have a lot of memories tied to like I remember I was in a basement bar in Washington, D.C. I'm trying to remember the name of the place. It was not too far from the Capitol. And I was downstairs in the basement, and I was playing like dollar poker with the bartender because we were bored. And somebody played on the jukebox the White Stripes, Seven Nation Army. The first time I heard that little doom, 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 and I'm like, what in the ever loving hell? What is that? There's certain songs, like the first time you hear it, they're so sonically different. And that's what grabs my ear, and you kind of remember that the rest of your life. For me, another one would be like the first time I ever heard, this was 20 years after the song had come out, but Whole Lot of Love by Led Zeppelin in somebody in my truck, like hearing how they did the panning and things like that. My friend, played it for me, and I was like, oh, I was hooked on Led Zeppelin after that point. People like, first time I heard Bad Guy by Billie Eilish, it's just, or more recently, like Fortnite, Taylor Swift, these are just different. So, sonically different that they just kind of stick with you,
Yeah.
So if we can write something sonically on the record, or produce a record that kind of sounds like that, then also if you can make lyrics that are kind of universally, appealing, make other people feel like I'm feeling, then that's kind of the goal. The goal in lyrics for me is to kind of write like a song like Love of My Life by, Queen, so that like you're in a stadium with 80,000 people in Brazil, and you feel like the song's about you, but everybody there feels that way.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up a great point about, just memorizing particular patterns in a song, and you automatically know like that's what it is, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. So two songs actually do that for me. I remember as a kid, one of them being I Hope You Dance by Leanne Womack, which is like, you know, when you get that intro, it's like, oh, I know that's her song. And then the second one is Today My World Slipped Away. It's from the 1997 album from George Strait, Carrying Your Love With Me.
That's a great song. Absolute great song. George Strait has a lot of, I mean, he's got a lot of great songs, you know. The King had a lot brought to him that were some of the best songs in the land.
Yeah. Well, did you see recently, I mean, he was in College Station and he had over 100,000 people at Kyle Field.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't, I mean, it only surprises me that he only had 100,000 people. I'm just teasing. I mean, George Strait is a national treasure. I mean, you know, he's one click down from Willie Nelson, you know, because Willie Nelson is just an international pop icon outside of country, you know, and just a whole phenomenon into himself. That George Strait, especially in Texas, in the state of Texas, you know, don't mess with Texas or George, and don't say anything bad about George Strait, right? Too.
Yeah.
What bad can you say about George Strait?
Yeah.
The only thing I ever hear people say is, well, he just sits up there and he doesn't move around much. Well, you know, he doesn't need to move around because he's got the voice and he's got the songs. But he's he draws. I mean, that's a great example that you don't have a big ass stage show, you know, and pyrotechnics and everything. Like if you've got a voice and you've got songs that connect with people, that, I mean, all you have to do is sit up there and sing. I mean, I think one of the most spiritual experiences that I've had, especially with country music, was the first time I saw Chris Stapleton perform was at a UMG showcase at the Ryman, probably about 10 years ago. And it was before he blew up, but it was after he'd been signed and he had his album, and him and Morgan came up. There was a bunch of different artists coming and playing. It was a radio seminar, and he comes up, and they've got the stool to sit on to play, and him and Morgan kind of face each other. And he sets a piece of coal on the bar stool and doesn't say anything, and then he sings "Daddy Doesn't Pray Anymore." And in that whole full house of just, you know, raucous people, you know, you could have heard a pin drop. And you know, it's one of those moments where you feel like you're in the presence of greatness, like when people describe seeing Johnny Cash and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that's again proof that you don't have to be flashy and showy to captivate. So, but my goal would be, you know, if you can be flashy and showy and still captivate on the slow stuff, you know, there's a lot of artists that are great at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely agree. And it's all about, you know, what's the saying people have? It's like, there's that one artist, like every generation, that totally like transforms just the music industry overall.
Like a voice of a generation kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I don't know if you ever saw Step Brothers, but it's like, Daryl says the songbird of his generation.
Songbird of his generation, boats and hoes. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a Catalina wine mixer.
Yeah, it's a Catalina wine mixer. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he had another adjective, you know, that inserted in there, but
Dylan, did you touch my drums? Are you sure you didn't touch my Marshall amp? You know.
My God, that movie was a classic.
Great. I mean, Will Ferrell. I mean, he's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuts.
Yeah, crazy guy.
He's so good in everything. You know, Rick. You know, in the Talladega Nights. But I think Anchorman's got to be. You know, no touching of the hair or the face. So quotable. You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, to change gears a little bit. So you have a new full album actually coming out now. So it graduated from an EP to a new full album called Weekend Outlaw. And it's dedicated to the working class. And it's about not being afraid to chase your dreams of, you know, kind of a reoccurring theme in this podcast conversation. And can you provide some context on what makes this new full album Weekend Outlaw special to you?
Yeah. So, well, yeah, that's good. Yeah, Weekend Outlaw kind of started at, you know, it's kind of crafted over the pandemic and everything too. You know, I intended to have it out before now, but it's really just kind of the issue with how streaming and everything operates at this point. So the Ride or Die EP is kind of a combination of the new stuff, and then that's kind of a preview also of Weekend Outlaw. So the stuff that's on Ride or Die should also be on there, and we may have some different remixes and things. But yeah, overall, this is kind of a turning point for me. It's special in that it's my 5th studio album, which is really cool, and it's one that I've produced solo and played more on more parts and stuff on this too, musically as well. And I still try to get like a lot of songs on this album, I still kind of they're from co-writes, some that I've written myself. But I'm always, about the humility thing too. It's just like, on one side, people like to know that other artists like wrote a song by themselves, because it does it gives you I get that and most people don't care. Most people do not. Zero given, but for a lot of kind of musical elitists, pseudo intellectualists on one side, and also for people that just have just a respect for songwriters, and they like to know are the artists, how capable is the artist. It's a good way to know, in a way, if you see an artist that wrote several of their songs and well, this guy was writing all this stuff and blah blah blah. But even like Taylor Swift's great songwriter, and she's writes with everybody all the time. It's just Katy Perry is another one. Katy Perry is one I love to use because that Breakout was one of the Boys album. Like Katy Perry broke out with like Hot and Cold and Kissed a Girl, and those 2 big smashes on that first album. There's a whole story behind her that most people don't know about, like bouncing around and like had the struggle she had before all of that. But on that album, like there's several of my favorite songs on there is like she wrote solo, like which you don't ever see that on pop stuff anymore. Like there's some great songs, like Mannequin's one of my favorite songs that she wrote solo. You're not a man, you're just a mannequin. It's just so I get that because that makes me love Katy Perry even more as a writer at the beginning. So all that is to say, I still try to keep my cadre people that I've come up with and learned to write with, and just people we have different ideas with, like Lovesick Drifting Cowboys, one that I wrote with Shelby Lilo and Victoria Powell. And at the time, Victoria is she's kind of a former child pop star from Canada. People don't. She's kind of like, I always tease her that she's kind of was like Robin Sparkles in a way, but. But she's an attorney now. Like she was working at the publishing company we're at. She's a great singer and songwriter, and she would write. And she had a lot of friends that were songwriters in the Nashville community coming up, but she was kind of trying to get out of that, and she's like an attorney now. But so we wrote a song, and I think like in 2017 or something. That's Lovesick Drifting Cowboy, and that was like my first #1, I think, at Texas as a writer. That'll be on this album, and so that's kind of cool to see people that have come up with to get #1 songs. Like today when we found out that Something Out of Nothing, one of my main collaborators, Alex Dooley, who's been a fixture of Nashville for like 20 years or something, like I think he got his first #1 as a writer today, which is like really really good. So so there's part of other people give you different perspectives too, but for the whole theme of the album, like I wanted to play off I'm a doctor, right? And so there's a lot of doctors and attorneys like to, have their hot rods or go do their stuff. They've got their balding and have Porsche 911s or whatever, and like their weekend warrior kind of things. And so there's that whole aesthetic of the weekend warrior. And at the same time, that world is crashing with my, the internal world of being true to yourself and the whole outlaw movement. Not like when I say outlaw, I mean like Willie and Waylon, kind of like people that were just like anti-Nashville establishment kind of thing, of just being not necessarily anti-establishment, but not trying to fit into some mold that's super commercial, and just try to be your own thing. And I think that whole movement, like then some of the greatest songs in the 20th century country canon, like Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, and even the theme from Dukes of Hazzard, comes out of that. Just so many great songs by Willie. Willie cut Poncho and Lefty, the Townes Van Zandt song at that time. just so much great music out of that era that was just an aesthetic of, hey, most people don't know it, but Willie Nelson was a massive hit song. Like Willie Nelson was like, to say he was like Shane McAnally of the '60s or whatever in country would probably be doing maybe both of them as a disservice because they're both great writers. But he had massive hits. He wrote Crazy, Patsy Cline, like one of the most recognizable songs, and a bunch of others. But so he had the Nashville chops, and then he, kind of left that aside to just, pursue the art that was coming to him. And so that whole outlaw side, and so that's what that big explanation is, because that's what I mean by outlaw. Because the opposite, like a lot of people perceive outlaw country as just like trying to be a badass, and like, it's just like we got sloppy distortion pedals and whatever. I love sloppy distortion pedals, but I'm really about, I walk this really hard tightrope of authenticity and being a doctor. You know what I mean? Because like if I was on one side, I would have totally fit in like with Motley Crue or something, although I was smart enough to stay off the drugs and stuff. But on the flip side, like I can't be that rough and everything around my patients. And I've got, I've had kids the last, 10 years. I live in a house of teenagers too. So, so for me, it's, I hate artifice, and so I always feel like if I'm doing anything that looks remotely like I'm a badass or something, I'm really self-conscious about that, which is a struggle because I'm more of that kind of person as far as musically, you know what I mean? That fits in that. So that's a tightrope I have to walk. So it's kind of super annoying to me when people are just like, oh yeah, we're outlaw, blah, blah, blah. So, but what I mean from outlaw is that it's more of a philosophical thing about being true to yourself, and that's, where you meet the weekend warrior thing to being being true to yourself is like, you only have, memento mori, the Latin expression. You remember that you're going to die. If you live to be 110 years old, you've only got so many sunsets you're going to see. You've only got so many Friday nights and so many weekends. So make the most of your life. And gosh, I mean, this is a lesson that people have difficulty learning even in their 60s, I think. But it's really hard even in your 20s. Maybe the hardest is like figuring out who you are, what you want to do, because, you have societal pressures and advice from people that you, at the end of the day, you have to figure that out for yourself and what, gravitate towards what makes you happy and gives you fulfillment. So for me, Weekend Outlaw is kind of a mishmash of the, people that go out and when they have their time, when they're not having to work to support and pay their bills in this destructive economy right now. And when they have time for themselves to go out, you have to make the most of the time you have. So try to, live without limits on that side.
So it's kind of like, it's kind of, it's going to be a weird way to say this. It's kind of like embracing that quote unquote midlife crisis that we all have when we get older.
Yeah. Your quarter life crisis, your midlife crisis, anything there. I mean, I won't say the only, but I think the most effective ways of facing existential crises of whatever age or whatever cause is to deal with them directly. I mean, that's been banged over my head, through life. I mean, you want to sweep stuff under the rug, but eventually you're just going to you're going to keep getting on Amazon and getting bigger and bigger rugs. If you keep sweeping stuff under, you have to really do the work and most people aren't willing to do the work on themselves, and I'm not talking about trying to be a pious person or anything like that. I just mean you have to evaluate your beliefs and your ethics and the way you live your life and like almost from a third party perspective and like, is this me? Like, do I do this because I was taught to do this as a little child? Do I do this because I feel societal pressure or whatever, or is this how I truly feel? And a lot of times you're not, I think people are afraid they're going to upend their whole life and, not come out the other side knowing what to believe. But I think it comes back to that unexamined life, like living an unexamined life is like, it's the saddest thing. Because if you're at the end of your life and you look back, that's like where you have the regrets. It's like, oh shit, I didn't want to do this. Like I didn't want to spend the last 50 years, killing myself as a doctor or working in a factory or not being married or whatever, whatever your problem is, or how you perceive it, it's hard to be honest with yourself, and you kind of take time to do that. I think those of us that can do that have the intellectual capacity and like wherewithal, or for whatever reason life forcing us to do that stuff and make the decision to analyze it like that. I mean, we're really lucky.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't have time, or they don't think about it, or whatever reason.
And specifically, is that kind of how you want to be remembered in the genre? And I also include community of country music, because although there's a lot of similarities, you can also define them as their own separate entities. It's, not being afraid to chase their dreams and being true to who you are. Is that kind of what you want to contribute to both the genre and the community?
Yeah, I think that's one thing for sure. I think more specifically for me is, I would encourage anybody to chase their dream. Like you have something in your heart, there's a reason, that was put there either, by something greater than us. You can call it God or the universe or the cosmos, or, just maybe it's random firings from your brain or whatever. But, I feel like there's something non-physical, more than us. There's certainly something that connects human beings, kind of like flocks of birds that turn, on a dime when they're a half mile away. So I think, learning to kind of lean into that is a big challenge. I think that's one of the great challenges in life for somebody that's trying to look for meaning in life, and you would say, like the spiritual, some kind of spiritual pursuit, whether that's in a traditional religious kind of background, or maybe just even a broader, why are we here? What's the meaning of life type of situation. So, so I always pursue, or always recommend people do that and try to encourage. But I think if I wanted to be remembered for something, it would be that, I hope that I'm making music that doesn't sound like everybody else, that's different, that's unique. And I'm trying to embrace that weirdness, because everybody's music's different, and we're usually self-conscious about it, right? So if you're like into some really weird, obscure genre that uses just castanets and I don't know, like a theremin or something, and like you're the top person, like you've got 200 people that listen to the music in the entire world, but that's what you do and you're like the best at it, then that's probably, if that's really what your calling is, I mean, that's more successful than to, be trying to sound like everybody else on the country charts or Billboard and, even make a living off of it. To me, it's finding what really makes you happy, like what sparks joy. I hate to use that phrase, but really it is that simple kind of. So yeah, I hope I'm not like, I hope I'm one of those artists that, it's hard to put a finger on,
Yeah.
Well,
I can't, on a personal note, I can't wait and really look forward to when Weekend Outlaw drops later this year.
Thanks for putting up with my multiple TED Talks, because I can get kind of deep on the philosophical side too, but some people get that and some people don't, but so that's the subtext in the music, really,
And James, where can people find more about you?
Yeah, this is not an endorsement of one of the most evil corporations on the planet, but since most people use Google, you can. Sorry, did we just get shut off of YouTube for me saying that? Sorry, I didn't mean to deplatform us. I'm just teasing. Google search James Robert Webb. The first 500 things are probably me, unless you see the English comedian Robert Webb, and then you probably forgot to put James on there or something. But so jamesrobertwebb.com. All my social handles are JRW, or I'm sorry, James Robert Webb. But yeah, whatever your friendly search engine. I'm really using Ecosia. I don't know if you heard of that, but it's a not-for-profit search engine, and they take their profits and they plant trees with it, which I'm not a big environmentalist, but I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Wow.
So just that, if somebody hadn't heard of that, it's kind of a cool thing to look at. So Yeah, but jamesrobertwebb.com, or just search, and that's the best. We're on every platform. If you find a platform we're not on, slide into my DMs and let me know. But yeah, we're Apple Music and Spotify and Pandora and Amazon and Deezer and like a trillion others that are out there, right? Our distributor Vidya does a really great job with that, so we don't have to worry about it too much.
Awesome. No, this is great. And be sure to subscribe to Down in the Country podcast on YouTube. Podcast episodes are also uploaded on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer the audio version of this conversation. This is Dylan Reed signing off. Thank you so much again for your time today, James.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and thanks for listening to me ramble on about.
No, of course. No, you educated me a lot on your music. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Dylan. Well, I had a great time and learned a lot about you too.
Same here. Have a great rest of your.
Everybody out there watching and listening too. Comment in there. I'll try to reply to them, and we'll see you on the next Down in the Country podcast.
Of course. Have a great rest of your week.
You too.